podcast.
Hey everyone, so welcome back to Behind the Screens, where we talk about what actually moves the needle when it comes to building a sustainable, supported business. I'm Ina, been in the virtual space for 7 years, and trust me, I've seen what strong delegation looks like and what happens when it falls apart.
And I'm Steph. I'm a nurse turned entrepreneur and real estate investor. And I'll be the first to admit, I used to be the kind of business owner that held on to everything too tightly. Definitely a type A personality. I still struggle with it from time to time, but I've come a long way and have learned that with delegation, it's one of those things where you really do have to trust your people, trust your judgment, your hires, and the results will follow.
Yes. So for this segment, we will talk about, of course, why most people wait too long to trust. And I think that's fair enough to everyone to still, test the water first before they fully trust somebody, especially when we're talking about in workplace or team members, right, Steph?
Yes, and I personally talk to a lot of business owners that are just like me, whether they're in the Airbnb space, a realtor, just a small business owner, or just somebody's starting out. And one of the things I really hear a lot is that I will trust them once they prove that they are reliable. And that sounds like that makes sense when you hear it in theory, but the issue is that, if you're starting off with suspicion or just uncertainty, they can feel it. They can feel when you don't trust them, and it for them it feels like they're just under a microscope being looked at. So there's a lot of more behind it in the psychology of it that I think we need to unfold.
Exactly. So I've actually worked with owners or business owners who gave their employees employee logins, but there's no real authority. So sometimes they say things like, let's test if they're really capable, and then eventually they will give them the employee a broken SOPs or zero guidance, and then they wonder why things aren't moving. So actually, that's the beauty of having a system or an SOP or anything written process in place, because you get to teach your people that you hired yourself. I'm sure that for every employee that you hired, they went through your human resources department, your, of course, recruitment team, and you trust that in order for you to expand your business, you really have to delegate some of the parts of your business. So that's why really don't be hard on yourself. It's not really a sin, to be honest, to, you know, test the water first. But of course, as a business owner on your part, you still have to do your best in order for you to trust someone. You have to do it, just do it.
And it's funny because I can understand the hesitancy that most people have. It's a very normal feeling. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to grow your business, if you're trying to get out of just being every single person in your business, you have to trust someone. And they say, oh, innocent until proven guilty kind of thing. And in a way, that's kind of how you have to look at it too. Because you're not just picking somebody, you are going through a vetting process. You're
Yeah.
using your judgment to say, hey, okay, I think this person is really good. I do think, some caution is there, but the caution I think is sometimes it's like brought in from past baggage is the truth about it. You bring your past experience that you had with, let's say, a not so good hire, and you apply it to the next person, even though you don't really know them yet, and you don't give them the benefit of the doubt. You carry that with you, and it's easy to do that. Most everyone does that. So I think really the first thing is to have the awareness that you might have some preconception based on your past experience. That, hey, am I applying this to this person? Is it me or is it them? And once you can admit to yourself if that's really the case, then you can start making choices not based on how you feel, but on what your process is. And so having that standardized hiring process, okay, this is what I'm going to give them. And, because at the end of the day, if you think about it, you're going to set your VAs or any hire up for failure. Don't, if you already doubt them in the first place that it's going to go wrong. So it's a lot of mental work that I think a lot of clients and leaders just need to be aware of, because I don't think those things will truly go away, but it's not acting on that suspicion right out the gates, because it's not fair to your hire, and you are kind of putting yourself in this bad cycle of, okay, it's not going to work out just like the last one. So there's a lot more than meets the eye when you're going through the process of hiring.
Exactly. There's a lot of things that you really need to consider as well, especially when you're hiring a new team member. And we experience this like in a day to day basis stuff. That's in Bravo in our business. That's experience that a lot of clients is looking for replacements for every hire, not from every hire, sorry, let me rephrase that. So we cannot avoid that at some point we need to find replacement to our team members, right? Because at some point it's not no longer working, regardless of how long they've been working with you. But at the end of the day, they still have their own decision to leave or maybe grow through the with the other companies. And for you as a business owner, of course it doesn't mean that someone left the company or lose your trust. It doesn't mean that you also have to lose trust to the next one. Trust is really everywhere. Even though the simple thing of going to the market and buying things, right? You have to trust that this is the right brand for you, or I mean the right, even with makeup, right? As girls, we trust that the brand is really suited for our skin. It depends on our sensitivity, something like that. And it's also in the same thing in the workplace. You really have to show trust. And if ever that you really cannot get that at the first time that you're meeting your, let's say, your new member. I think it takes a lot of process. And for me, based on experience, in order for you to foster trust with your employees, you as a leader should of course prioritize open communication. That's number one. And also transparency, consistency, follow through on commitments to your team members. It's also important that you empower your employees. You are the ones who's going to break their limiting beliefs in your business so that they can also, get how you think, how you run the business, and they can foster it and, reflect to it. So I have a question for you, Steph. Um, in a client perspective, since you've been working with a lot of people as well, especially someone, overseas, how hard is it for you to trust somebody who's not working beside you, working first, someone who's working virtually or overseas? How hard it is to you to trust someone?
So when I first started working remotely with anybody, I think I will say I had the advantage because I myself was working remotely. I was working for
Mhm.
an insurance company as a registered nurse, handling health information, which is very sensitive stuff. And so to me, and I was had my coworkers were all over the United States, and we even had overseas people too that were entrusted with the health information. So in my head, it was like, well, I'm working remotely. They're trusting me with documents. Like they're trusting me that I'm going to protect the sensitive information of patients and whatnot, and also that of the insurance company. So, what difference is it if they're also remote too? So that perspective for me was there because I simply was the person working remotely in the first place. So, but this shouldn't be too hard to imagine though for others that haven't worked remotely, because think about it. You're always calling somebody remotely anyways, every single day, whatever it is for customer support, looking at your information. So that's what I think about it. But what I find challenging more so for other people isn't remote work um, in general. It's the country of, it's the fact that they're not where they're from. They struggle with that. And for myself personally, I'm like, remote is remote, whether they're, in Canada, whether in Europe, Philippines, Africa. It's to me, it's like just because they're in a different country shouldn't mean anything different. They're still remote. Like the method of it is no different. And I guess that's the beauty of it, right? Because when you call some of these folks and you don't know where they're coming from, other than you can get a hint from their accents, but other than that, they're still doing the same thing anybody else would that was local to you. So um I think that's just that belief right there. When I hear that from people, I'm like, that's so totally you. And it's not to say it's not validated, because maybe you had an experience, but you are putting your own preconceptions And it's an exception because it's applying to you, but that's not always how it is for everybody else. So it's getting someone to realize, okay, maybe I'm just the one that's carrying this with me. And if those people can actually move past it, they do so much better because the people who hold on to it, and we've seen clients where they've had teams before and they just can't see, they always go back to their past experience because
Yeah.
they want to protect themselves.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's great and all, but you're also holding yourself back and you're holding your team back. So you are setting yourself up for failure. So it's it's truly getting past that fear and trust the process. It will work eventually. It may not work on the first hit because I was talking to somebody actually online yesterday evening, and he was looking for a bookkeeper. And he told me, well, I worked with a company before and it didn't work out. And so I'm a little hesitant to try again. And I pretty much brought up to the part where it's like, attrition's normal. I mean, it's no different than an in-person hiring. People,
Basically.
you probably held several roles and it may or may not have anything to do with the company. It could have been a personal decision. So you just don't give up just because of a bad situation. It's like dating. One date doesn't shouldn't stop you from trying again because the end result is worth it every single time. It just you need to have some patience.
True, exactly. So we encounter that a lot of a lot of times, especially when we vet assistants to clients that come to us, whether it's an executive assistant or bookkeeper, especially in the bookkeeping parts, and actually executive assistant too. But you know what? Actually, for every role, let me just crop that because one question that I almost get asked is that how do you make sure that they are trustworthy? It's a big word, right? Trustworthy. So in order for us to really, even us ourselves as the the employment agency or the staffing agency, we also don't have the control on how we can say that, oh, this someone is trustworthy, because we've done a lot of we've done a lot of case studies here now. Before, we started with just hiring someone experienced, but we figured along the way there's a lot of hiccups and gaps on that, and we started training our own people, and apparently those who we trained are the most trustworthy ones. Like the percentage of that is higher compared to someone who came from outside, because when we were training our own assistants, our own VAs, we're not just actually training them for skills, but we're also building a culture. We're also building relationships with them, not specifically something romantic, but that they can trust us as well. So us if we want them to trust us, we should trust them as well. So, it takes two to tango, as they say. If you want your employee to really trust you, you really have to trust, them as well. Show as well to your employee that you're trustworthy. Even us in our side, let me speak on behalf of the virtual, people here. We also have hesitations as well, just like clients, because we've experienced a lot of times, just like clients abroad or overseas, that we get to be ghosted by those business owners who hire us, and that's worse, to be honest. And I wanted to also, like, what you call this, try to stop that kind of myth behind working with someone remote or someone from a different country, because it depends, right? Sometimes, yes, you have to really be careful. You really have to do a lot of assessments. That's why even us on our parts, we do a lot of assessments. Before, we're just doing a lot of interviews, getting to know them, how they speak, or they're based on their resumes. But now we've added a lot of security, background checks like employment verification, or they have to submit um police clearance, something like that, because we want to be sure as well that we are letting in someone into our business, someone who's safe to work with, and someone who is, of course, will protect our data in the business. So I think for us as well in the virtual team, there's a lot of things that's been happening behind every process. It takes a lot of a lot of tasks, a lot of mistakes in order for you to really say that, oh, I trust my business to my employee. Because again, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't even happen after a week or two, right? It takes a lot of days and weeks and probably months. But for us, in a for us, Steph, I mean, I wanted to ask you this as well. When we've been working for almost 2 years now, so I wanted to know or ask, when did you know that I am trustworthy of your business? I think that's a good question. I want to ask that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a great question, and I will say I like that you did bring up, the just to back up that clients have to be trustworthy too to their team, and I think a lot of people, especially on the client side, they don't think that because they already assume they trust themselves, right? So
Uh-huh.
they don't think about their own perception to their team members as well.
Yes,
So
exactly.
trust goes both ways, and I remember, well, I learned this just in general because I'm like, and this wasn't with me, this is just when I first started with virtual assistants in general. I'm like, I realize this might be scary for them too because they don't know me. They don't know
Mhm.
if I'm trustworthy. I trust me, but I want them to feel comfortable. And that was the first thing I thought of was I want them to be honest and comfortable with me because I think if they're not, it's going to be a little bit hard to work together. So I want them to get to know who I am so that they'll be able to feel like, okay, I can I can give my best to this person and trust that, that they're a good person to work with. And I challenge those that, you know, have issues with VAs in general and really think about this for yourself. Because if your VAs are quitting and you are somehow losing your virtual assistant team members, chances are it's because of you. It's probably
Because the denominator, it's you.
yeah, yeah, and I know that's it's a little bit of a tough pill to swallow because who wants to think badly of themselves?
Mm,
It's already enough pressure as it is, but at the end of the day, you do have to really look at, why does this keep happening? And a lot of the times, you find that it's it's the delivery, it's how you're doing something, how you're talking to them, tone, your style of communication, reread your emails, your text messages, especially on the virtual side. It's so many things that we say over text or writing can be miscommunicated with the tone, even
yeah.
if the words make sense. So yeah, you have to be very mindful of that so that your people can trust you too. And you will find better results and it'll be a better just experience in general when you'll know it when you can see how that person is responding to you. So a lot of this is just people IQ, emotional IQ, but a lot of folks, especially left brain people that are very just business, get it done, transactional, they don't think about that part of it. So
Yeah.
I challenge those that, and if you haven't gone a virtual assistant yet, put this as one of your pillars in your value system. I want to be someone, or I want to create a culture or an experience for those that work with me that's positive. And then that starts with you. You're the one that has to set that intention for your team and it'll come back to you. But to answer your question, when did I know I could trust you? So one thing I'll have to say, I don't know if this ever got brought up, but I'll also tell this to our listeners here. So when I first found Ina, I already had virtual assistants before that. So I was experienced with it. But it was a very small team, like very small team at the time. But it was important to me that my other team members felt comfortable with whoever was going to be hired on because being such a small team, there has to be harmony. And
Yeah.
if there, I don't like drama personally in my business. So I want to make sure we can get along. And I think that's nice because your team members too feel that they're being valued. Their opinion matters. So during the interview process, I did my own personal screening beforehand. But once the interviews hit, I actually had another virtual assistant of mine join me on on the interviews. And I remember I already knew what I thought in my head after I interviewed Ina. And I asked not for reassurance really, but it was just like I'm curious. And then, so I asked them, I won't say their name out loud, but I said, who did you like the most? And they said you. And I
Really?
said, yes. And I said, I felt that too. And then I was like, why do you think that? And then we both had the same agreement that, you just were, the way you were, you're so diligent. Like everything about you on paper and your response time, I have to say one of the biggest things, and this tells you a little bit about myself too, but your responsiveness really stood out to me the most out of everybody. And it just kept getting better the more we got to talk to you. And then I also talked to you on my own too. So, but after the hire, and we started working together. I would say what I really liked about you that helped a lot was you are giving very honest feedback, but very good feedback. And I can tell that your intention was to help me with what I'm doing. Like you were being very helpful. You weren't just sitting back waiting for, okay, you actually gave me you gave me more value than I was originally thinking of in the first place.
Mhm.
So to me, I said, okay, she really does seem to care. And that is right. That was the word. You seem to really care about me and my business and helping me get to wherever I was trying to go. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I can see the heart. That is what pretty much. So it was pretty soon because you tend to, it shows constantly in everything you do. So it wasn't really without a doubt that I felt that too.
Yeah,
And and that's when I knew that I'm like, okay, I can trust Ina.
it's
So
actually the same thing with me. I would just would like to follow that because I think this conversation, being us the example of a VA and a client relationship. I think to follow that one, the reason why I showed you that I care, that I have a heart, is because you also care for me and you have a heart as well for me. Whenever we have huddles, like I think 80% of it, we're just talking about life, right? And then business comes after it. And I think that's also one of the important touches that you're doing to your assistants. That's why we're able to trust you. And like what you said, I'm not the only virtual assistant you've worked with and you're working with right now. And the reason you know there is secrets as well. Personally, right? We're talking a lot of things here. That and the reason why we're open because you showed us trust that you are a trust. I mean that you're trustworthy. That's why we know to ourselves that even though you live in a different place or something like that, that you're trustworthy of everything that we say, right, or we share with you. And that's the biggest thing, or the biggest um impact that you're giving us. And I still remember the first time we met. I will not go to details how we met, but that's the thing that tested our trust to each other, because our date was a different kind of date. We were all shocked when we were, when we met Steph in person. It was like, oh, we're going to do this. It's our first time meeting each other. So you know what I mean, Steph, because we did a sauna thing and something. So it's like, oh my gosh, this is it. We know.
I'll make voice of this because I know the listeners are like, what is she talking about? So, all right, guys, I live in Southern California in the United States. I'm born and raised here. I am Filipino. Okay, if you're listening, you're like, she doesn't sound Filipino, and I'm like, yeah, it's because I have no accent. Okay, but I look. Actually, I don't even know if I'm Filipino. People think I'm other cultures. But anyways, I took a trip to the Philippines. It wasn't my first time, but I haven't been there in a very, very long time. And I don't speak the language, unfortunately. My folks didn't teach me. But I was going to the Philippines for vacation with my parents and family and with my partner. And I met a couple of my virtual assistants in person. And that's to me, a lot of clients, when I told them that, they wanted to do the same thing. They thought it was the coolest thing ever. So I got to meet Ina. She was one of them. I got to meet in person. And it was fun because me being the one coming over, and also, I always was like, okay, I'm gonna treat you guys because, we have fun days. So we had a dedicated fun day in Manila. And I treated them to basically a spa day. And, you know, I think, and then if you want good ideas, guys, what to do to treat your team members, maybe a spa. I couldn't think. I was trying to think of something we could all enjoy, but also, something relaxing because you can either go crazy and party, or you can relax. So that's kind of what we did, and I got to meet them, and then it's hilarious because, all right, if you know Filipinos, we're all like the same height, okay, and it's not very tall to begin with.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit older than Ina, and I'm not that much older, okay, but I'm at level 3. I'll let you think about it. And she's almost there, but not quite there yet. So I'm like, wow, I'm like the same height as everyone. I think I'm actually a little shorter.
Yeah, taller than you. That's what we noticed. Bev and I were like, Steph is so short, right? And I was like, yeah, she's so cute, like in person, because she's so little. It's totally different, in screen. But we're so happy that we get to do that. And yeah, we hope that next time we will be the one to be able to visit you there, so that you can tour us around. And it's so
Oh
fun
yeah.
because after the spa we get to have a drink, right? Some drinks, and also we went on a buffet, and that's a very good also, time for us to get along with each other, right? So I think that's a good sign as well that we're building trust to each other, not just trust, but also building relationship. We never talk about business or work during that time. It's just getting to know each other, and I think that's one of the key, ingredient as well for you to be able to know your people. So that's why team building exists, right, Steph? We've been planning to do that ever since. If ever that we will grow more, we maybe you can fly here and get the chance to meet everyone that we're working here in the Philippines, and I think that's the best thing that we can do, right? And I think soon enough we can do that. But for now, I think we can go to the segment three, where green flags, red flags, what early trust looks like. So I would like to share that I also have experience with recruiting people. So whenever I recruit people, I don't just look at skills, right? So if I only look for skills, I can just have that resume and then just hire them, give them a job. But it doesn't work that way, because just like every other client or business owner, us as a staffing agency, we also need to make sure that this person that we will hire is someone who is our reflection. It's just like having a partner, right? They say that if you what the man that you will marry is your reflection. Have you heard that kind of statement stuff? And then we don't just look we don't just look at skills, but also we look at the behavior. That's why we do personality assessments as well. Of course, integrity shows up early. Green flags, things like that, asking clarifying questions during the recruitment process, admitting when they don't know something, or following up without being reminded. And I think during the interview we also ask a lot of questions as well to for those who wants to join our team, because in that way we know already if they are a green flag and red flag. So green flag and red flags, guys, are not just in relationship or friendship, but also with hiring people.
And like red flags aren't just about mistakes that happen. People are going to make mistakes. You will make mistakes as, the leader, and your people will too. So, but it's honestly kind of reading between the lines. And I know in the virtual sense, it can be a little bit more challenging because you're maybe not interacting as much, but you almost have to look at it like, okay, the big picture here. How have all the interactions been? What's if you're giving feedback and they're pretty much avoiding it, acting like you never gave it in the first place, and just doing whatever they want to do, and it's not, you guys are just not aligning. Those are ways you can see a red flag that may not be as obvious, or they're only doing like bare minimum, like they're barely passing, and maybe that's not the type of person you want on your team. So
True.
things like that, we want A players, not C players, kind of thing, because C is passing, but A is exceptional, and that's those are things you have to recognize that might not be verbal. So it does mean that you as the leader have to basically take leadership, classes, not even like official classes, but at least work on your personal development on being able to recognize that in others,
Yeah.
because you will have to really read in between the lines. That's something I personally have learned, not just in the virtual sense, but in the in person. I think it's easier to see this in person because there's more body language involved. But on the virtual side too, you can, if you can keep your eyes open, you'll see them there too.
Exactly, exactly. That's why I always say that trust isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. And for me, it's just my own perspective. It will be easier for me to trust someone if they're being honest rather than they're just trying to be, just trying to sugarcoat things. I would be very honest. I would be more comfortable if you're saying, you know, what you should say. You're being honest rather than just making up something for me just to get along with you. And I'd rather work with someone who makes a mistake and owns it than someone who hides behind silence. And I always say this to all virtual assistants that we've been working with, that it's okay to make mistakes, right? Because it happens. That's something that we can change. And for us virtual assistants, our responsibility is to learn from that mistake, not to make that as a habit. So, I always tell this as well to our clients that your VAs, especially during the first 30 days, will be, a roller coaster ride for both of you, because you have to really accept the fact that they will make mistake. And that's something that you have to own to yourself as a business owner, because you're the one who's going to set up your VA for success. And I always say that it's okay again to make mistakes, but if you're making the same, if your VA or assistant is making the same mistakes all over again, then that means they're not learning from it. It's either there's something wrong with how you instruct the task, or it's just that your assistant doesn't seem, to know how to follow instructions, follow instructions accurately, or, for me, if you make the same mistakes all over again, that's a choice already,
Mhm.
especially if that particular task that they had been making mistakes is has an SOP. So there's no way for them to, like, for me, this is just for me, there's no way for them to make mistakes if it's already in the SOP or in the fact sheet something. And I think for that, you really have to work on it as the business owner, even though you know to yourself that you've done a lot of things already to avoid mistakes for this particular test, but you still need to analyze. There's always gonna be something wrong in every process, and you have to take a look at that and what you call this, improve it over time.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to add is that if you're noticing something as a listener, is that we're very pragmatic people, and it's a really good thing I think for everyone to kind of hear that, because where we kind of go back and forth between our personal experience and what we do as business owners, but also what we do as an agency to help support business owners and our virtual assistants too. So I think one of the things at Bravo is, and most people they don't think about this if they've never worked with an agency or they don't hear it. But one thing that what happens with our clients is, because they hired us as a team to help them with their VA, not just place them, but to help manage, but also help them learn how to be better leaders, is scenarios like where uh, a client feels torn. They're noticing a certain behavior with their VAs and they're not sure what to do about it or want a second opinion and feedback. And what Ina does, and I always credit this to her, is she's very honest with our clients. Hey, maybe do this, do that. And if it keeps coming up, maybe we need to find a different virtual assistant for you. We think in the best interest of what that client needs and also what our VAs need as well, because it does go both ways. But, if we recognize as an outside perspective or a third party that's there to help you that you're having the same issues, we'll still try to facilitate with that VA, and try to make it work. But if it keeps happening, then let's get you somebody else who might not be a good fit. And a lot of times they're really surprised when this happens, especially coming from Ina specifically, because they don't expect that, oh, we're the middle person, but for some reason there's this thought that we're biased towards one side or another side. And that's not the case at all. We really are in the middle and we look at it for the facts and what is being observed. We always trust and verify, but we really do care for our clients, and we're also there to help guide you. The cool thing is you don't have to start from scratch. If you do have to get a different person, different hire, we're there and we can work really quick. So I say that as part of a big benefit of the agency route, specifically with us at Bravo, because most people, when they're hiring, they think about the cost and they think about the lack of control that they may or may not have because there's someone else that they have to work with and not just their virtual assistant directly. So, each model is different for everybody. It might not be for you, but uh, consider that, because I have to say it's a huge benefit to have someone on your court that can look at things. And also, if you're not doing a good job with your VA too, and the concerns your VA has, we'll let you know. And most you'll never find that in other places, because one, I can tell you right now, sometimes it's hard for your own virtual assistant or hire, even in person. I've experienced this, to give you direct feedback because they don't want to.
Yeah,
They're worried that they're going to stir the pot, rock the boat,
exactly.
and it's like the kids not telling the parents how they feel. They go tell their friend or their aunt, and then that person tells their parents, uh, which is kind of like that's us right there. So um, that's one thing I wanted to say, and the fact that again, trust goes both ways. You do have to lead with trust as the leader, and what that looks like too is, and this is something I have to tell myself all the time, but it's follow through and it's showing up for your team, because if they ask you to do something too or they need something from you, just do it. Because for them to move past, you know step 2 requires you to sign off on something. Now, obviously, this you can set the expectation of like, okay, this is not going to be a big rush task. It's going to take time. That's okay. So, because one thing that I've learned and noticed with clients and their VAs sometimes is how urgent is a task, especially or a project.
Mhm.
How quickly do we need to get through it? And sometimes, if you don't set that expectation up in the first place, your VA might think this needs to be done now, or they might not realize the urgency behind it unless you communicate it to them. But there might be this back and forth. I'm guilty of it where sometimes I've given a project, I know it's going to take time. And now the next phase is for me to check it, give feedback, and it takes some time for me to get to it.
Yeah.
That is okay if your timeline doesn't have to be super fast. But one thing I know I need to work on is actually communicating that part of, okay, how long will it take me to actually look at it? And again, it goes back to communications. So, but if it's something super urgent that needs to get done ASAP, you should specify that so that your person can prioritize it and know that, oh, this really does need to get done. I'll push my other tasks to the side for now and focus on this because she said it. And most times, if you don't do that, they're not going to know. So
Mhm.
again, it's showing up, and I have to say, ever since before I had VAs or any hires or help, I found it super hard to show up for myself. And when I started having people help me, they got me to be better. I have to if they're there doing what I'm asking of them, I got to show up too. So I joke that my VAs make me show up for work to work or get stuff done. So it's accountability is what it is. Your own people can be your own accountability partner. So, but yeah, you want to start with self first before you expect that of others.
So now, if you are building a team, whether you're a solo as your host or just a solopreneur, and hiring your first assistant or a full real estate team expanding fast, or big team big team joining your business, here's your action step.
So first things first, you really do need to audit yourself. And how are you currently setting up trust? What does that look like? It's not always verbal, it's action is what it is behind it. So are you leading with control or are you leading with clarity in what you're asking for? And are you building it with, check-ins because you care or because you're afraid? And there's a huge difference between that, and it's something for you to think about.
True. And we put together a free guide to help with this. It's called the Trust Builder Checklist. It's a simple tool you can use during onboarding to build alignment before the friction starts.
It's in the show notes or in the link in our bio. And if you're leading with trust already, share your story with us. We'd love to highlight your growth in a future episode.
Yes, and this is the stuff no one teaches, but it's what truly scales a team.
So lead with trust, grow with purpose, and we'll catch you next time.
Behind the Screens podcast.